Hi, everybody. Let me just get myself all set up here. You should be able to hear and see me. I think everybody is joining us here. Looks like, okay, good. We're all set. Welcome to my webinar today. My name is Debbie Penko. We will be focusing on Risa 3D, and the goal here is to help teach you guys how to be power users from an expert like myself. So a quick little introduction of myself. I'm Debbie Penko. I'm the Chief Product Officer. I've been here for a long time, and I am definitely an expert in Risa 3D as well as all our other products. So I will do my best to kind of go through giving you guys efficiencies and tricks that I've learned along the way, how I may use the product. I think whether you're a new user or an old user, it's always fun to see different ways to do things and potentially you find that thing that makes it go a lot faster for you. This presentation I put together based on the entire products team, which is all structural engineers that are either supporting the software with tech support or also helping to build the software. I pulled all of them and said, what are the things you think users don't know about that you love? We found kind of all the different nuggets of things that people want to do and need to do better. And so we asked, and they gave me some ideas. I had a lot myself, but I'm glad I got a collection of different people answering that. So let me get started here. So we're going to jump right in. You should be able to, hopefully I can, there we go. You should be able to hear me, the audio options. And so the what you can see on that is that you should be able to either join with your computer or with your phone. It's a standard Zoom call, so jump in. You can use this, the information that comes up on your screen. You should be able to jump in there. And if you can't hear me, that's the big indicator of that. But I think also the big thing is to try to use that Q&A. So if you have questions along the way, I'm going to try to pace myself so you guys can follow along. But if there's something that you're asking along the way, please, we have some moderators here, so please jump in and ask that question. So let's see here. I just want to quickly just give some background on Risa products so that we're going to be focusing on Risa 3D today, but Risa 3D is not our only product. It's part of a family of different products. Risa Floor is a building modeling tool that helps us to build floor by floor. That's why it's called Risa Floor. So it does roofs as well as floors, and it calculates all the forces down in the gravity. That's Risa Floor. It talks to Risa 3D. It sends all its lateral loads into Risa 3D, and you can design the lateral system over there. You can then also send that same information over to Risa Foundation, which is your foundation design. So you have those products are connected. Risa Connection is also a product that does steel connection design. So that one integrates as well with Risa 3D. We also have a two-dimensional product, which was the very first of Risa, was Risa 2D. And that's really just Risa 3D, but on 2 dimensions. And then Risa Section, which also helps you build up section properties. So all these integrate with each other. But we're going to focus straight on just the Risa 3D side. Risa 3D, Risa Floor, and Risa Foundation were just released. So we have the version I'm going to be showing off today is that version. So you can play around with version 21 is the one that we're going to be working with today. And feel free to jump on the website and pull that down and be able to get that same version. The other product that we have that's brand new, we put out this not too long ago, is called Risa Calc. And Risa Calc is a product that helps you build components. So we have a lot of different components in Risa Calc. It's got seismic generators, wall footings, spread footings. You're looking here at a spread footing. You've got retaining walls, joists, composite steel design, all those things kind of just component by component. So beams and columns as well. So this is a really good product it's web-based. If you haven't seen it, jump on our website. You'll be able to see Risa Calc. And you can definitely do a free trial on that one as well. So we're going to focus on, the other piece, last one before I jump off that one is also Adapt. Adapt is part of the Risa products as well. I don't know if you have been aware of that, but in 2020, Adapt was part of Risa. So we've got PTRC and Builder. These are really heavy focused on concrete. So PT is a very strong strength for also. So if you're doing PT design, I would definitely recommend Adapt Builder. Is a great tool for building design for post-tension. But if also just a single strip kind of analysis, that's PTRC. So it's almost like the two-dimensional version of that. So great tools if you're looking in concrete and then specifically post-tension as well. We're going to jump into some of the tools that I have. We're going to focus on Risa 3D. This is really just an outline of what we're going to do today, but not a lot of slides here. We're really just going to go into the product. But the tools I want to focus on are how to view the model. Risa 3D is three-dimensional, so it can get kind of difficult to see things behind things, right? So that's a lot of the tools we're using are helping to see in 3 dimensions. Modeling tools, things that are potentially helping you to build your model. A lot of things start in different ways. Either you import your model or you start drawing your model, but we've had a lot of cool tools added for building that model inside of Risa 3D. I'd like to show some of those off. And then some advanced tools and troubleshooting tools. A lot of times when you do an engineering model, you're actually asking lots of questions is why doesn't this work? How do we get this to work, right? So that's really critical in this piece. So that's the tools we're going to be looking at as well. So I'm going to jump out of here and just jump right into the program. So this is, hopefully everybody can see. I'm just going to double check. I made the transition. Yeah, you should be able to see my Risa 3D model. I'm on my screen. I have an example model that's got a lot of kind of interesting things in it. Risa 3D version 21 has the same look and feel that you've been seeing here for a few years now, just a little bit different. But one of the things I'm sort of playing around with in this 3 dimensions is that it's a little complicated, not the easiest of models to look at. And one of the first things I do a lot of rotation with my mouse. And if you're not doing this, I recommend using your middle mouse button right here and holding the shift key. On this type of model, that will help you rotate around the model really well. But one of the tools we added in the last few versions was the ability to do some things like, we've always had isometric. These are critical, right? Isometric XY. We added this degrees inside of here too for rotation. This might help you get to a specific direction. In difficult situations, right, maybe you want to get to 15, you need to get to that certain degree, and so you can look at something straight on. This helps you right on the screen. I really love that we put this right here. The other thing we did is that if you hold your shift key and you hold on to that axis, you are rotating it. I think we got 45 degrees turns on that. So I'm actually moving it in 45-degree increments. This, again, for a very complicated model might help you really orient yourself in the model. But you can always grab this and rotate it like this as well. I'm a big fan of this axis. But the other piece of this is that we have lots of different ways to customize these too. So you can add snap views. We added some snap views for you automatically. XY was always there, right? But we put some negative ones in there. You can add additional ones right in there. So if you know a specific model needs to be set like that every time you go in, add the view. That's a great way to do it. While I'm in here, I want to just point out that all of these are customizable. When I saw that these are the standard in black, the blue ones are customizable. So I can actually delete them and add different ones and change all that. So these bins, or what we're calling little carriers of all these icons, those are customizable, which is new. But what I'm going to add to the panel just for ourselves for later, I can add or add it to an existing one, or I can add an additional one. So let me put it on the 2D lock there. That's this little lock right here. I'm going to edit that one. I'm going to go find some animation tool that I really like. If you've ever looked at your deflected shape, you can also animate it. And if you do that a lot, then why don't you just put it on the screen right there so you can just push the button all the time. So that's what I'm going to do, is put that in under view and results. And all I did was click on this little toolbar to get that. And I add it right there and it pops in there. And so when we have results, we can animate it, which will be an easy way for us to figure out what's going on in the model. We can always deflect it, but animation also helps me understand the model better. So we've got this model that I'm just zooming around on. And one of the other major things that got added is kind of an old school CAD feature, but I like it a lot, is that we have a match button right here. So under modify, you'll see match. And if you click on that, you can click anywhere in the model and match that. So you'll notice I have some interior columns that are pretty small. Maybe I want to match one of these other ones that are exterior ones. So I'm going to click on that, and every bit of information about that is going to go into this one now. So now it's the same information from that one to that one. So you can do it like that. It's a really easy way to grab a couple of different columns and change them, and it'll make the change to that that material. If you also notice that I hovered about that, it's giving me all the information I chose. That's customizable as well. You can right click, and then inside of this, there's a hover tool right there. If you click on that, it's got some options on what I want to see in this member. So I've asked to see the label, the length, material, and design rule. If I don't like all that, I just want to see the label and the length, I can uncheck that. And now my hover is just showing me that information. So kind of cool if you are zooming around the model and trying to understand what the length of things are and how what you want to see about it. That's a great little feature. The other one is, and this model is why I chose this model to kind of look around is because it's kind of complex, right? So it's got a lot of angles into it. And one of the things I try to think about was, you know, if I look at this area out here, it's pretty extended out as a cantilever. Maybe I want to tie it back to this area here, but I need to do some kind of different modeling to kick it back here and get it in line with that. So what I'll do is I'm going to draw a little bit on this model. And I'm going to turn this to be not rendered. And the drawing tools that we added, we've got a lot of cool tools inside of here. And it's fun to just play around with them a bit. So what I'm going to do is just say File, Draw, and it jumps straight to the drawing tools. So it will quickly do that. I can actually show you guys later how to change that if you don't like that jump over there. But the goal would be you can either turn on a display grid if you like that. But in my case, I want to draw to this member, and I need to draw it kind of kicked off this member. To do that, the quickest and easiest way I like to do that is click to the local axis, and I can draw right to this member. So now I'm drawing at the local axis direction. I'm going to draw in it perpendicular to that local Z direction. And I will go back and draw in at a certain increment. So I know I want to go in at 5 feet. So I'll tell the program, hey, let me draw this 5 feet up this. So it's going to let me click to that point at the local axis. And then I'm going to draw, let's see here. So I'm clicking on this guy right here, and that's quarter. So sometimes you click these things off and on to help you gain access to a specific point. So I'm going to click at 5 feet. That's right there. That increment shows right there. And now I'm drawing on the local axis of this member. I'm also going to draw it out by maybe 1 foot, let's say 2.5 feet. 25, 2.5. And that'll let me draw out incrementally 2.5 feet right there. So that is kind of kicking it off that one member. Now I escape that, and you can see it lets me draw. That's a perpendicular increment off of that. I can keep drawing things like we can draw this back to a certain point on here. For example, let's say I know I want this column is currently I hover over 11 feet. So I know I want to maybe hit 8 feet, but my little increment is hitting me at 7.5. So what I want to do is do a straight 8 foot. And then I will be able to kind of click on this at right as I hover about there. It's getting me at 8 feet. And I have a click point. So kind of lets you do a lot of different angles and things using these increments, local axis, even global axis. So the way I would use global axis in this case, again, if maybe I say that this kicker back is not good enough, I need to actually drop a column in. Well, in the old school, I could have copied that node, draw a member, and then, but I can just say draw to the global axis. And I say, I know I want this to be at elevation. What's this elevation? 11,167. So I just put the increment of 11,167. And oops, there we go, 167. And I just draw that here down to the first increment. And there it is. Right. So I've got all those little pieces, and the match property, which I just showed you guys, I can just match this column to this column. Good. And I can push escape and then match this. I know this area, let's see, we'll render it just so we can see what I think these are all channels. So I can say, okay, actually I want to match this property to here and to this guy. And I know I'm going to use about the similar type of style shape there. So quick and easy ways to draw in some odd geometry on the areas that you may need some funny things on. And drawing those tools, just modify those drawing tools. All you have to do is sort of play around with local, global increments. Perpendicular would also have done some things for us too. But I'm going to go ahead and just put a boundary condition on this area, and I will go down there and drop that in. Okay. So this little area is an important piece. But the other thing too is this model is complicated enough to probably I have made some mistakes in this model, maybe just now, but also potentially in the past, I might have just drawn things on top of each other. So if you're not doing this as a good practice, I definitely recommend jumping over to Modify Model Merge. This is a tool that you should be doing pretty frequently. It just helps you get rid of merging members. So if there's things on top of each other, if there's, it'll help to inactivate any inactive members. The crossing members, I don't typically click. When I cross members, I want to actually, that will merge them. And so they'll get a joint at the middle. But a lot of times with braces and things, I don't want them to behave together. So that joint would be a problem. So I typically don't click that one. But I would merge inactive members if I don't need them anymore. Trim and extend will extend walls or beams that are just close enough within model merge. So that's always a good one to do just in case you've drawn things a little short. So I'm going to say apply to all. I did have a lot of members that were trimmed and extended. And then you can see here I had 2 duplicate members. So that model merge is pretty powerful if I had made any mistakes. But I did actually have some duplicate members, which means that they might have just caused me problems once I did solution. So I always suggest to do a model merge as you're building your model. Let's then go ahead and create one last piece. I just want to, this is a model that has a lot of repetitive loading on it. It's the easiest way to do this type of repetitive loading. Once you've laid out this, all these area loads, these are actually area loads because they're playing on top of these members. And it's an interesting geometry, so it's not simplistic, but once you've applied all these area loads, the quickest way to do to make changes to those is to jump into the spreadsheet. You can go ahead and make changes to those area loads. You could do it on the screen. But if you need to make a new load combination where, basically snow or live load, the way that this model was built was using this button right here that says you can copy. So you can basically out here, sorry. You can copy from one load into another. So this one up here, copy loads. If you click on that, you'll see you can copy from that dead load right into another load combination. You can define it and drop it in, but I can just show it right here. So you can say, hey, I want to take all of these area loads from the roof dead and copy it. You can choose which ones you want. You could do just area if you didn't want all of them, but you copy it into that. By doing that, it will then allow you to, and it's right here, that blank one, I could put a name to it, but then you can make changes, like you can change the magnitude. If you knew this one was, for example, snow, you could do a fill and say it's negative 100 pounds per square foot. And we'll jump back on another snow example, but this is kind of allows you to see, okay, this is an additional type. Let's call this. This is not really my real snow, but we've had it snow there. You'd see it be right there. And I could just go back to my load combination basic load case. And so if you have to try to draw a lot of loads in there, utilizing the copy command is super fast and I recommend it. You could also quickly adjust things on the fly. This is newer to, let's see here, newer to this version, to the last couple of years, but making changes to the actual the snow load right there is as easy as clicking on it and making the change right on the screen. So I definitely recommend that as well. Okay, let's go ahead and run the model now that we've done some of the background work. So I'm just going to run a single combination, and just so we can see a quick thing that I'd like to point out. So making this analysis, this has got a little bit of plates, so it takes a second to run it. But what we come out with at the other end is kind of interesting. So we should hopefully here pop up into a single combination, and there we go. So a couple things happen. First of all, the node reactions pop up. And this has been a comment for a long time. What I like to use these node reactions is kind of a sanity check, right? I look at it and go, okay, I have about 1,100 pounds, almost 1,200 pounds vertically in this model for self-weight. That jives with what I want. That's kind of the thought process of why your node reactions pops up every time. But if you don't like that, if that bothers you, you're like, I never want to see that. I always want to see the code check, for example. This is the most important thing to you. You want to see what's going on in there. You can adjust those things right there. The way you can do that is you can go into a file, application settings. You can go into output, and there's an option right down here at the bottom that says spreadsheet to open after static solution. So right now, by default, everybody who installs the program, you get node reactions. But if you chose code check as an option there, or none, if you're a person who says, hey, I don't want any spreadsheet to pop open, I'll open my spreadsheets as I needed, you could say none. But let's say you want code check, that's a really good option to do. And I suggest, at least modifying it the way you want to see there. So this one is a really cool option that we just added not too long ago. Another thing in the general tab, just while we're here, it's nice to see, you can also see those hover details, which is what we just modified in our right click. But if you don't love the jumping around of that ribbon, like I showed you when you draw, there's an option to turn off that behavior. So it won't change for you automatically. That's the Enable Smart Ribbon toolbar. So you can turn that off. But a quick other thing too, to in here, let's see, you've got a lot of different things to play around with your background color. I think lots of folks are in the older versions go into that black version. You can also do that here. You should be able to change your screens so you can use multiple screens. That's another toolbar here. One of the other ones that my colleagues really love is an ability to, let's see here, click in the white space, the workspace to clear. So if you click that option there, it allows you to, and I'm just going to clear the results. Whenever you click a selection like this using your mouse, you can just click in the white space and it will clear. I'm more used to using the escape button, but it's either way you get used to it. I think it's kind of a nice feature in order to customize the way you like to work on these selection bases. Well, in the selection, as we look at it for a second, there's a ways to select things, and I'm going to actually run that model one more time, and we'll see that Unity check pops up. But selections between different things is kind of an important part of Risa. It helps you drill down to the area you're looking at. In this model, you can see I have like two roofs overlapping. So probably we're going to be concerned with one area at a time and look through because they're kind of interrelated, but not quite, right? So first of all, code check popped up, which is nice. So the first thing I try to do here is just kind of look at a certain model, and I use the lock button a lot. I don't know that I did that ever before I worked here. I used Risa before working here, but I never really worked on the lock button. So the lock button helps to kind of lock out the entire model. So the way I could do that is I can use my mouse, and I'm going to actually go off a render so it's easier to see. So I grab all of the things here in my model, and I'll grab these pieces as well. So it's replacive. If I use my control button, it will actually be additive in that selection. So you can see how I'm doing that. I'm picking things up in my little, as I use my control button, I'm grabbing more and more selection. The lock button was a tool that I've used for a long time. I love that it just kind of gets rid of the rest of the model. And you can work in this model and see, okay, now I'm just looking at what's happening in this model right here. But if locking also just can be disorienting because you may not know where the rest of the model is, you also have a button. Instead of lock, we have another button that does called dim lock. So it kind of looks like the older version where you can see that kind of grayed out selection. This also helps you just look at, you're just looking at this one area, but the rest is sort of dimly lit in the background, which is why we call it dim lock. So you have two different kind of ways to do some data entry in this model. This would all be things like we can make changes to the model, we can do all sorts of things. But one of the newer features that we added is called viewer mode, which is a whole other different way to see things. And I think it also helps to understand the results a little bit better. So if we go to the viewer mode, this is just for viewing, but this view mode helps you see what's going on in the model, in particular the forces. So you can, in this same view, it looks kind of like the dim lock view, but it's more for viewing results. I like to see like what's happening in the model graphically, for example. So if I'm looking at like moment or shear inside of this, I can see just what's happening in this case, in this dim lock view. And you can turn, labels on, you can turn, I'm going to turn off my plates. So you can say, okay, sorry, my plate labels, there we go. So I can kind of play around with this model and understand what's happening in this viewer mode. Now, the other thing about this view mode is that it helps filter out input and results. So whatever I select on the screen right now, whatever is actually selected. So I can select anything in this model. Let's just say I select most of the columns at the base here. I'm going to grab all those columns. And when I go to the members spreadsheet, I'm only seeing columns because that view is collectively filtering for me. So this will help me see, maybe even for me, I would say this is a pretty great way to see the code check, because now I'm only seeing the code check on the columns, right? So I can sort these code check. I can do a sort inside of here. I'm going to click this absolute max to absolute min. And I'm now looking at just this area is the ones that are the failing ones. So the view, we could also go back and say, okay, let's look at the color coding of that. I can color code based on Unity check, and it helps me as well to see that information. But this is sort of a nice way to filter out, maybe it was just a certain part of the building you were concerned about. This piece would then just collect those things. We would look at just the node reactions for these members that I have selected right here. And if you're not using your selection on your screen like this, with your grabbing your toolbars like this, or excuse me, using your dragging of your mouse, you also would definitely want to go and use your selections based on really detailed information, like all the members that are columns. You could do it that way as well. So I would say this tool is really important for me for viewing results. It's when this is called the viewer mode. I'm going to uncheck that. But back to the Unity check, another way I like to look at, so I have a bunch of failing members. I wanted to kind of let us see what's happening that's failing, and I've got quite a few. So I have 68 members. The way I like to do this to look at this information is I highlight it and either go on to the top and say select, or I also right click and say show selected views, lines in current view. And then when I'm out here, I can now see the ones that are selected, and either can do like a lock to see them directly. This is kind of another way I use that lock button. And these are the ones that I want to see for code check, what's going wrong. Let's go and change this here so we can see it a little bit better. But those are the ones that I want to particularly care about. I think we're looking at our moment right now. But those are the specifics I would jump into looking at the code check. I'd say, okay, these are the ones I really care about. How do I select just those ones? And that's a big thing I usually use to select just those code check areas. So that's a part of it. Also, the quick find tool is another tool to help me find the problem. Where is that tool? This one. This was 2.7, or these two are really high code checks. Remember 113. Where is that one in this model? So this button right here, this quick find button, is the easiest way to jump directly to that member. So I can go member 113 and zoom directly to it. So zoom right there, find out what's happening on this member. I can either use, now that we know about these dim lock tools, I could potentially turn that one on. I see it independently of the rest of the model. I see what's happening on it. I could go back and look at okay, is it the axial? What is happening? Potentially this is a moment problem. And lastly, obviously going into the detail report to dig in deeper, but a lot of it is looking in perspective of the entire model to understand why it's failing. It's a lot of times collective. The system is something is happening. So there's a lot of things tying into this member. I can see that from the axial, the forces, right? So there's stuff happening along the members. So this is kind of why zooming into that one member is pretty important. So I would definitely recommend quick find. That's a quick, easy way to jump to that member. And then we've got, lastly, if you're not familiar with this tool, I would definitely recommend spending some time getting to know our internal force summation tool. This was one of the ones where I would say it's really important to understand how to use it really well, but once you get a hang of it, so it's a summation tool, and it cuts across your entire model. So you can take sections of the model and summate across them, or the entire model. If you use your internal force summation tool, you just click on that little summation and you click on a node and define a plane across that member. So if we say we cut across right here, I'm going to grab a node so it clicks on something here. Just need to click on something that's grabbing, and there we go. Oops, and I'm cutting right across that. There we go. I think it's giving me, there we go. Okay, so I just cut straight across the bottom. And as I cut across that bottom, I find forces in the F1, 2, and 3. And that force across there is a new global plane. So it happens to align with the plane I'm using, which makes most sense for me. And if we remember, I'm looking at that almost 1,200 pounds at the bottom of that self weight. That's exactly the number we're seeing right there. So that's the forces that you're cutting across at the very bottom. And then it gives you the moment of that entire model. And you can find your geometric centers and things like that. But right now, what I did is I just cut straight across. And this is a tool that's very sensitive to what load combination is being displayed. It's also sensitive to the plane that you're using and then what has been selected. So by default in Risa, if nothing is selected, it means everything is selected. So in this case, I didn't select anything. So that means it's all selected. So it cut across that model. I would tell you that a lot of times I use internal force summation for like a section, just a little piece of the model, maybe at a moment frame I'm looking for what's happening inside of that. And then that I slice across there. You can also do it on wall panels. But this internal force summation tool is a tool that helps you really slice across and get the analysis information out of your model based on what you're looking for. So that is a tool that definitely need to pay attention to. I think it'll help you understand the model. So that's kind of all the things I wanted to show off in this model. Lastly, one little other piece, nugget of fun in the application settings. There, I'm going to turn off my click to workspace. I'm not good at that. I like to use escape instead, but there is a cool tool in here. If you push on the advanced button, some folks really like to increase their node size, and it just helps you to see better. Even your text scale, you can increase this, and I'm just going to show it kind of larger, just funny kind of sometimes, but you can see if you go in there, let's see, I just deleted it by accident, but you can go ahead and increase this to, let's do something a little strange, large, but maybe you have a hard time seeing those nodes. You can actually increase them. So this also increased the text size. So if you have, you want to maybe see all those different nodes, that's a great spot. If they're too big for you at that point, definitely go back and scale them back down. We think we ship the product with it at 1, I think is our standard, maybe 1.5 for your text scale. But it's a great way to be able to see easier into your model. Okay, I'm going to jump into another model. I'm going to go to File, Open, and jump into a different kind of model here. So let's see, pop into this one is a wall model that I built. Kind of put a little system of a roof together on top of it, but the big piece I wanted to show off was a wall panels inside of a roof and some loads and kind of understanding what's going on in this wall panel. If anyone who ever, sometimes I teach classes and people say, hey, you always open a model, it goes into rendered view. If you ever wanted to change what your view setting is so that when you start the model up, it'll remember it every single time. In the view, there is a save as defaults. So I saved mine so it always opens as rendered. I like that to see things rendered when I first open, but you can adjust that and for yourself, however you want to always open your model. Looking at this model in particular here, though, the big thing for this model is I do have some loads on this, and I'm going to jump to my basic load categories here. So I have some dead loads, some live loads, some snow loads, and in particular, if I look at my basic load cases, I'm going to go to my snow load. So I have a basic general snow load on top of this roof system. And if I click on that, you can see here, it's just a snow load of 100 pounds per square foot on that. And the one thing I can do to change that, typically snow loads are projected. So if you look at the code, IBC says it's projected. We have a projected load as well. So you can change that to be a PY instead of a vertical Y. So the program will adjust that load for you. When you run it as a projected load, you can see automatically it adjusted based on the projection. So the idea being that, snow, if you're in snow country, you already know all this, I'm sure, but as snow falls, it's on a straight horizontal view. The snow is coming down. So whether you have a high slope or not, it's changing the way that how much horizontal you're actually going to see, how much square footage is going to get that load. So it's a projection. So 100 pounds is not really 100. It ends up more on a projection. You can adjust it manually, but if you do it this way, it'll also project it for you. So this slope is pretty high, and we're saying here that actually reduces it to 0.85. So the total load will be the same as if it was a flat roof with 100 pounds. But when as you apply it all along with a rake of that roof, you're going to see that it's a reduce there on the vertical. So this is a quick way to do that, and I recommend playing around with that and making sure you understand your snow loads. But you can do that piece there. Another tool we have inside of this model. So this model was imported, and as I look at this model, I think this one probably came from Revit, but what I can see is that there is a long list of digits on these nodes, right? So depending on how you import your model, we have a lot of options, Revit, DXF. You can draw the model and then copy it and do all sorts of stuff. When you draw it yourself in Risa 3D, you probably aren't going to get these crazy different length of numbers. But if you import it maybe from another CAD product, potentially you do get these very long numbers. It's normally fine, but every once in a while it can be a problem where things don't line up properly and you just need to clean it up. So you can do that. There's a modify round off coordinates, and we give you the option to go up to 3 decimal places, 2 or 1. I would say always do this with caution, right? Because if you want to make sure, what I always do, if I ever do any rounding, I also do another thing where I zoom in real close and I look to see that I didn't miss things, that things are still connected. And you're going to have to actually rotate your model pretty well, zooming around. But potentially you may, if you rounded it wrong, you may end up actually not being connected anymore. So rounding coordinates is a great tool, but once you do it, zoom in a bit and make sure that maybe some of the tighter areas, like on a slope specifically, make sure that they really do work, that the node's not sitting off of the member. We do give you some tolerance. So when you go into those settings, into the advanced tab, we give you a model merge tolerance of 0.12. And that's a great way, great distance. I wouldn't recommend increasing that, but that model merge when we did in the beginning, it's sucking nodes together in this model merge distance. So if you have a model that's got a lot of digits and things, that rounding can help, but it also can potentially separate some nodes if you got a little crazy in there. So always be a little cognizant of what you're doing inside that. Let me go ahead and show you a couple things here also. So let's solve this model. I think we have a few load combinations that are helpful. So I'm going to just batch through a couple different load combinations. I am using multi-thread solution, which is in the model settings. Sometimes it's a little slower as I use Zoom, but I think we get through pretty quick. And in this model, I got some pretty nasty unity check. Again, I changed that, so unity check is popping up right for me. I always like to recommend taking a look at your unity check, but before even you get to your unity check, if you ever heard me speak, I'm always big on look at your deflection probably as well. That's another piece that's one of the more important parts, is to look at your deflection. Because a unity check doesn't mean anything if your whole model is flying off the screen, right? So you want to make sure you look at your deflection, and this doesn't look too bad. We're pretty amplified, but we did put that animate button in there. So now if we like to animate that as well, we can also see it animated right on the screen. That was the one quick button we added to our screen. So you have the ability to see it animated. You can export animations. Might be nice for a presentation if you're trying to show somebody how the model is working, and you can change the scale and increase that. You can always type in here and make it. Sometimes also I make it very large to see, so I understand even better the animation, how good or bad that can happen. Okay, so in this case here, let's see, I'm going to undeflect that. But one of the things I want to show a little bit about is the newer versions, the detail reports got a little bit more fun looking. I'm going to click on one so we can just see how we might even incorporate this in our report. But if you get a nice summary report for your wall detail report, which is really important, these regions are now interactive. So if I click on one, it will highlight below what is the area I'm looking at. So that's a nice way, especially if you have a very complicated wall, to see exactly what region you're looking at. And let's pick one here in particular. Let's say actually R4 maybe. That's a little bit Unity check. I want to check it out. So all I have to do is just click it, and it will jump right to that Unity, to that detail report that gives me more information. So there's a lot of pieces on this wall detail report that okay, now I start to understand the calculations specifically on that wall. If you pop back over to here, I'm going to also show you guys on the detail reports for members. Very similar detail report, but you may not be familiar with this part of the options. So in the years ago, you had lots of different ways. You have like one sheet, and I really like one sheet because it's very concise. But sometimes we look at it and we go, wow, I do want to know a lot of this piece of information. So you could, you have options to either see it a lot expanded, a lot not expanded. The options are there for you. You just have to click those options right there. And you could say, hey, I don't care about maybe the shape properties all the time. I only care about, either material properties. The design properties are the only thing I'm really worried about at some point. And I can say, okay, just uncheck those, maybe even the member summary. So all of that is gone, and it starts to condense this down a little bit. In the opposite way, if you're saying, hey, I always want to see the expanded detail report, I can click it to expanded and it will show it all like that. So I've now customized my detail report so that I'm seeing what's important to me in my report, and then it's always like this, and it's basically just customized, right? So if you have it customized in your detail report, you can then go into when you're printing your reports, so you go to print reports, and in here, it will get you into those detail reports. You have that report type as custom, and it's the same settings I just set. So it's allowing you to do all expanded, just the summary on the diagrams, and then it's telling me all the different design properties, but nothing else there. So it will get long, right? Because we just expanded those, but you can then turn on and off different ones as you go. So you can be able to put these different detail reports into your report as you need. You could do a lot or a little, select all. I'm not going to do that because it's going to be a lot of detail reports in this model. But you could go ahead and customize those as well. So I would recommend, typically, you have a sense of what things you want in your detail report. And if you're the kind of person who says, there's only one I really want expanded, you could just expand that one, and then add that to the report. If you'll notice, when we were in that, let's go ahead and go back into one of these. When we're in here, we can make this option do all this we want to, and then just add it to the full report, just the single one. And then we could go back and change our other options and come back in. So you can one-off things as well, so it's not as harder to see just like the one that's failing, for example, if that was the one that you're interested in. One other piece here I'd like to show a little bit too is that this is a little more detailed, but I think it's an important note to be able to combine drawing tools with analysis information, right? So one of the things I'm showing in the screen is that I have a column right here that is combined with this wall. So everything this column is experiencing is happening along the length of this wall as well. And I can confirm that by clicking on that column. And I can see that we have the best way for me is kind of axial, I would say, is probably, if you click on the axial report, you have little notches or in your diagram, basically, little steps. And that's because every time a plate is connected to it, it's sharing the load. So we're seeing each plate corner sharing the load with this column. There's times when you don't want to do that, right? So what we would recommend is offsetting this column, this wall. So this wall would be offset in a little bit, and we would connect with rigid links. Rigid links are a topic that is an ability to rigidly tie things together with a little fictitious member, but it's more like a connection, or however you're going to make that connection come true. This little rigid link could connect that. So what I did when I think about how to do that, I looked at this wall and I said, I'd just like to shrink this wall by a certain distance, right? But then also connect it. So I was trying to think, how can I do that quickly? The quick and easy. So this is sort of what I typically do is I look at my modify tools and I say, what can I do quickly to do that? This local offset tool is a really quick way to offset things in one direction locally. So I can say, hey, I want to do a local offset of this column in the local Z direction. That's the little Z right there by, let's say, 1/2 foot. And I'm going to say click to apply. And it's going to go in its local positive direction of 1/2 foot. I'm also going to do it again in the negative direction. So I can say negative local offset and click to apply. And then I send it that direction. So now I have a column, and it's a fictitious column. This isn't real. I'm going to delete it after, but I'm going to click on what I can do is I can draw in, it gives me a click point to draw in for that wall as I'm going to shrink that wall a bit. So I'm going to click on draw members, and in the members, I'm going to go to, this is what we're going to be doing is a general shape, and it's going to be a section set called rigid, and that's what we use for a rigid link. So it's this little general rigid link. And I just start drawing it from the original column location to this new little nub point, whatever my corner point, I don't know how to describe that, but I do need it to be perpendicular. So I use that little perpendicular tab button there, and I click on that and I connect it. I can do it on both sides, so it's the same repeat right there. So I'll click on draw. Everything is remembered in Risa, so it's the last thing I just did will be done as well, and I click right there. So I have now two little general rigid links that are connecting to, and then all I have to do here, I'm going to turn back on my node labels, and I'm going to go into this wall, and instead of being this wall being going to 410, it's going to go to 419. I could just redraw the wall. Hopefully I can just squeeze it. Let's see if I can do this the way I want to. So I'm going to click on that wall, and I'm going to try to it won't let me do that there. I'm going to probably have to redraw it, but let's double check if I can do it this way. Yeah, so the problem would be is the limitation is that it's trying to make me stay rectangular. So I will have to redraw that, but it will be nice to be able to allow me to be able to get right to that point so I can redraw those at those locations. So I'm going to go back to home, wall panel, and now I have a click point right here and go to this part. I would have done it all over the place, but that gives me the ability to kind of use those offset tools. You would delete these new columns, and now this is rigid link. And I'm going to go ahead and I'll draw one on this side too. And we can then see kind of a little bit different on how the behavior of this wall behaves. So you see this right here. This is a rigid link. And if you want to see that graphically as well, let's see it in render state. You can see that that rigid link kind of connects just like that. This makes this column independent, right? So now it's not sharing load. It's only sharing load up here. So we could either do rigid link copies where we want to make that connection come true. Maybe you have an embed plate that you're connecting the panels to each other. The column is independent, or the column is fully part of the integral part of it. So it's up to you. The big important part is that you understand how it behaves and that you agree with that behavior. So when you run this analysis one more time, and I'll just run it just like this, we'll look at the first load combination again. But what we can see is we should start to see here, this wall now is independent. That column should not be sharing the forces. So we can go back into that, like we confirmed it. And we see now we shouldn't be seeing the spikes there, maybe just one. And there we go. I see that axial. So I just see one load transfer, but you'll see this is a smooth line because those plates as part of this are not sharing, right? So they're not actually adjusted to that piece. So an offset tool, a local offset tool right here is a quick way to do that. I think one of the big takeaways I have for the way with the modify tools, the drawing tools, think outside the box. Try to think about ways you could potentially draw things in your model or what are the tools that you have? I do know I have a click point. I have our drawing tools have a lot of different options with increments, perpendiculars, local and global axes, all those pieces. And then last step would be also you can import a DXF, right? So the other piece is we have options to be able to import grids, load a grid from a DXF. So that's another option too. I would say there's a lot of pieces to be able to draw on top of your model, but kind of look around the tools and try to figure out different steps to do that. I I did talk a little bit about the report printing, but one of the one pieces I think hopefully everybody knows, but from a long time, but if you don't know, you have lots of ways to create templates. Report templates are really great ways to turn things on and off in your model and get information that you constantly use. I was a tower designer back in the day. I checked tower designs and I always knew I needed nodes coordinates, right? I always needed that piece. That was a integral part of, I always needed the nodes. I needed the members. So specifically, I wanted to bring in the hot rolled materials, and I would know I needed the member data. And I used probably section sets when I was working in that. So I would say probably I would have done a quick way to do that is just to click on hot rolled and say, and you can turn on just your member data, maybe hot rolled and advanced data as well. So those would be like my critical ones. I might always want the same output. The output would have been another way to say, hey, I always need to know different kinds of node reactions, but maybe I didn't care about other things, like I didn't care about overstrength for my tower. So that would be how I would do it. And then I would maybe drag things up and down of importance, right? So you can always say, actually, the results were number one for me. I don't know that that was true, but setting this template is a really important way to say, okay, now I want to create this template and I can have this as always, I'm going to use it this way. So I would recommend, building out templates, and then the detail reports definitely can be something that you go along the way with as well as miscellaneous images. So like any camera, we have a camera button throughout the model. You'll see that there's this little camera button. And that camera button is also integral. And if you wanted to understand what's happening in this model. So if I'm looking at this, I can take this as a camera and I can scroll in and make it look exactly like I need so that I can get that into that report. So that is a quick way to get your reports done, started. Right, every model may be a little bit different, but a report template, and then as well as making sure you know how to capture those different pictures and where they go is really an important piece of solution to get to your drawings. So I think I went through a lot of different pieces. We have about 5 minutes left. Is there any questions I can help answer live if there's anything specific?
Yeah, here's one, Deb. There's been a lot of questions, so thank you for everybody participating in it. One, somebody had a question about modeling concrete wall panels. Basically, if they meet at a corner or there's some perpendicular that comes in, is there a way to stop them from sharing load, or would there be an offset that you would need to do in order for them to not share load?
For sure. Good question. For concrete, so the only ones that we do that automatically for in the settings is wood. You'll see that it says transfer force between intersecting wood walls. Wood walls is pretty unlikely that they would ever be transferring in plane, in plane and out of plane. That's sort of, that connection isn't typical, but you could, and that's why we have an option there. For concrete and for masonry, we do always do it, right? So we always kind of say, hey, unless you do this type of a separation, because really what's happening is that plate meshes are tying it to it. So we haven't seen, we've seen it much more in wood, specifically because wood cannot take out of plane load as well, right? So you don't have the resistance, but concrete and masonry inherently have the ability to take in plane and out of plane forces. So for that case, it is, you'd have to separate it.
So a connected question, somebody asked, when modeling a structure with walls, sometimes they detach the walls for the diaphragm, but they found that even when detaching walls, that they're still receiving some lateral loading. Is this because there are walls joining at the corners?
Yeah, that's exactly. So you can detach. That's a really good topic. I don't think I have any diaphragms in this model, but you can apply a diaphragm. It's a rigid diaphragm inside of Risa 3D. It's just a node that gets defined. When you do that, any node, and I'm going to turn my nodes on for a second. Any node is going to give you, let's push escape here. Okay, so any node you'll see it can be detached from the diaphragm right there. If it's detached from the diaphragm, it would just, that diaphragm does not affect that wall. But if anything is connected to it that is attached to the diaphragm will be connected, right? So potentially if I detach this from a diaphragm, these two, but I had a beam coming in or a wall coming in, and it's attached to the diaphragm, it will then be attached. So diaphragms are infinitely rigid, which is kind of a hard concept to think about, the fact that it is gonna, whatever touches it, but it is very rigid on that level. So it will transfer for sure. Work
Somebody,
quick. Yeah, I would say one little piece is drop the level down by half an inch or an inch or whatever. That's another way to, okay, then it's not going to be fully attached at all.
somebody asked, what do you recommend when adding comments or notes to reports?
Couple different things I've seen people do. You can just write comments in here, meaning you can literally skip lines and just say, dead load, this is from the tank on top on the roof, whatever and you can put notes in like this, and the next one, have lines like that. You could do that in the load combination spreadsheets as well. So we do have a limit on characters, but it's pretty generous for you to put enough information in there. But if you want to skip lines, you can. That would be probably the thing. You also can do inside of, excuse me, here, the info. You have some project notes. Definitely, this is a spot where I know I've left myself like pointers, like I put how much wind on this model and maybe didn't do seismic or whatever notes to myself. The other thing is there is a notes area. So let's see, sometimes I get lost looking for it, but there is a notes area inside of here. And I want to see where I know is kind of get lost in here. Hold on, I think I scroll. There's a notes area to get to here, and you can change the sketch information. And I
think the notes is on, I think it's in back. I think it's outside of the snapshot, and it's
okay.
back on the regular, like when you have nothing open under properties, like if you hit escape.
Oh yeah.
It's that project notes right there.
Yep,
So
right there.
Project notes there.
Yeah, so you can do there. Yeah, so you can adjust notes in there as well. So you've got a couple different areas to add notes, but that's definitely a feature that has been requested a lot more, to add like almost like comments into different things, comments onto members, and potentially. So that is definitely an area where we'll look to add in the future. Maybe you have a whole column that you can put some information in. Anything else?
There was a question about you didn't touch on wind and seismic applications. And obviously you might want to just mention the generators there.
Yeah,
They exist in.
So a big part was diaphragms. If you have a diaphragm defined, then you can apply inside of advanced tools. We have, these are all kind of your advanced libraries that we have, and wind and seismic would be also part of that. So you can define your wind. It will calculate that for main wind force resisting system, the MWFRS. So that will be there. And then there's also seismic. You can get that based on the seismic mass, and you'll define the mass that you have there. So Risa 3D is limited to just the rigid diaphragms, and that's for like building design. If you do Risa floor, you have semi-rigid, flexible, and rigid diaphragms that you can get the calculations for there. So the load application is slightly different for those different kinds of diaphragms.
And then someone asked a question about composite design. Is it possible to do composite design in Risa 3D?
Good question. So Risa 3D, you would have to manually draw in your steel member and then your studs and then your concrete slab. But Risa floor is a great tool to do composite steel design. And then also, so that's a floor system. If you want to do the entire floor system, it will calculate the studs and the forces of the composite behavior. But if you have just a single composite beam, a great way to do it is Risa Calc. So in Risa Calc, you can just do a component, one single beam, and it will calculate the same stud information, but you don't have to build the whole model. So that's a great single option.
Awesome. Well, I think that's it for the questions that we have. I know that there's still some coming in, but certainly we can try to answer some of those offline, just so we can respect people's time. But anything that you want to add in closing, Deb?
No, that's great. Thank you guys, everyone, for your attention. Hopefully you got some information from me directly about how to improve your process, and feel free to reach out and ask us more questions.